Is there any replacement for hustle and hard work? That is a question that me and Amanda Thomson of Noughty Wines discuss. Over the last few years, we've gone from a hustle hard culture to setting boundaries and creating time for yourself. What works? Do we want a lifestyle business or do we want a global business? And both approaches can work. Join me as we discuss the benefits of overworking and underworking. Welcome to another episode of the Anything is Possible podcast. I'm with Amanda Thomson of Noughty, and Amanda and I met on a roof terrace many years ago in Manchester over a glass of Prosecco. I was immediately drawn to another female entrepreneur and have watched Amanda's journey. I mean, so impressed with her new brand launch, which I'm going to tell you about in a minute, and also her involvement with female entrepreneurs, including EY. So Amanda's business is called Noughty. It is a non-alcoholic wine brand, but I'm going to get her to tell you what the brand is before we continue.
Thanks so much, Holly. Pleasure to be here. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? How we're never quite sure anymore what real time we've spent together or what online time in this world now. Yes, so I had a champagne and Prosecco brand, which was successful. I trained in wine and launched that, and we have just pivoted in 2019 to alcohol-free. And the Noughty is a play on words. It's naughty, as in 0%. The Americans love it because they don't use the word naught. They use zero. So that is kind of an interesting one. And now we're the world's leading premium non-alcoholic wine brand, which is pretty exciting. We've got a whole portfolio. So by next week, we will have our still Provence style rosé launch. So I've got the Blanc, which is just behind me. We've got a red wine, and then we've got two sparkling alternatives to champagne, a brut and a rosé. So it's pretty exciting at the moment.
Very exciting. But listen, I mean, non-alcoholic options are very popular at the moment, but when you launched in 2019, although there was a turn, it wasn't quite there yet. And then obviously we went into 2020 when wine took a massive resurgence because everyone was at home. So obviously this was an idea pre-2019. Can you tell us the journey to launch? Like, where did the, quite inspiring idea come from?
Well, I'd grown up with a mother who was an early stage health food entrepreneur, and not in the sense of kind of big American founder. She used to, be an entrepreneur in its purest sense, which was to make money and put food on the table. And she was in the health food space in the 70s. So this is when it was very hippie, delivering muesli on a bicycle. So I'd grown up recognizing the importance of a healthy diet. And then when I was at the BBC in the arts world, there was this interesting dichotomy, because back in my day, before social media, kids, I know, we used to party when no one was looking. That was the fun bit. We used to work hard and play hard, and often, highly inappropriately now, we would stay up all night and then we put on our makeup and be on TV or radio in the morning. And I met my husband in Cannes at the film festival during those days. So stories for another time. But that was really when I developed my love of fine wine and champagne, essentially when I wasn't paying. So it's very easy to be a champagne snob when you're not shelling out the cash. And so that was sort of my historical relationship with good wine. But I became really interested in the ingredients in wine when I learned how much sugar was being added to wine, and also chemicals at the lower end of winemaking. And interestingly, I can tell you this, in 2023, wine is the only legal consumable that doesn't have an ingredients list. So no ingredients list on bottles. And you may kind of go, oh, I've looked at labels. I've turned my bottle, the other way round and sort of looked at, what's on the back there. Actually, there's no sort of global legislation about what you have to list. So there's a lot of smoke and mirrors at the cheaper end of winemaking, particularly because just with processed food, if you want to make wine palatable, You chuck in sugar and you chuck in chemicals. There's no real difference. And sadly, under £10, £9 or £10 in the UK, you get very little going to the liquid. And that may come as a bit of a surprise and a shock for some of your podcast fans, that unfortunately, if you're still playing around when you're buying wine in that £5-6 space, very little is going to the liquid because of the cost of production, branding, dry goods. You need to get up really to £8, £9, £10 to actually get any qualitative level in the UK. And so I always say to people, the quick trick I say, forget even me selling my brand to you. When people say, oh, what's a quick win there? I say maybe just buy one organic bottle, maybe for £10, instead of 2 cheap bottles for £5. And that's just one sort of quick trick I see for a win in lessening those chemicals going into your body. But that really became the driver for me to set up my own, originally champagne and sparkling wine brand. And so, to cut a very long historical entrepreneurial story short, I moved to France, retrained in wine. I was one of the first students at the Cordon Bleu wine diploma course. And then I came back to the UK to launch my champagne brand because I didn't want to sell snow to the Eskimos in France. And then pivoted fast in 2019, so just pre-pandemic, that thing we don't want to really talk about, to alcohol-free. And so actually there was this really interesting opportunity for me because, well, we all know, Holly, how sadly, I mean, we kind of laughed about it, but also it was quite sad. Alcoholism was dramatically on the rise during the pandemic, and even those who didn't have a serious problem often, found that it became a daily occurrence earlier and earlier. And so there ended up being this interesting kind of dichotomy where sadly that was all going on. But I also recognized the opportunity that if I could create something really delicious and get it out there that didn't have alcohol, I was really doing something quite incredible in the world. So the vision piece was very clear. I wanted to build the world's leading non-alcoholic wine brand, but what I wanted to do, and this was the vision from the get-go, was really build my bottles into everyday traditional wine drinking. I wasn't building a sanctimonious brand. I wasn't saying don't drink. I was saying you've got a really delicious wine here that happens to not have alcohol. I'm just back from New York and I did a wine tasting with a brilliant taster. And he said to me, that isn't just great wine, Amanda, not just great non-alcoholic wine. That's great wine, period, which is kind of the mecca and what I was really aiming for. And so that is, I guess, the truncated version of the very big story.
So many questions. So one, I'd like to know this fun fact. So when we're talking about wines that have got high sugar and high chemicals, is that when they say that your hangovers are worse when you drink essentially cheap wine? Because like with anything, you can feel foggy headed if you have too much sugar, or is that the principle behind that?
So it's a bit more nuanced, but that's one of the principles. So sulfites get a very bad rep and everybody wants to jump on that and say, oh, it's the sulfites. Basically, organic wine, sparkling wine, unless it's entirely natural, and then you've got that whole cloudy thing where a bottle might be like Coca-Cola and fizz when you open it. That's a different niche world. But most wine will have sulfites, and it's not the sulfites per se that are bad for you, it's the levels of them. So yes, you've often got higher sort of preservative levels. You've often got those things added that you might not want to be there, and you've got the sugar. Ultimately, alcohol, ethanol gives you the hangover, no question. Yeah. So to not get a hangover, don't drink. But you're going to be in a better place if you're drinking wine that's produced in as natural way as possible. So, for example, going back to the financial piece, ironically, some of the world's finest wine is produced in Burgundy. It's made actually in a biodynamic way, but they just don't publicize that. So some of the world's finest wine is produced in a really natural way, actually. So there's a lot that's really hard to decipher, but my quick wins in wine are spend more, spend £9-10 on a bottle, look for organic where possible or biodynamic, and also find makers that you trust. It's really a bit of trial and error. And this is where it's quite a difficult answer to say, to not get a hangover, don't drink, or drink Noughty. Or really often it is a case of spending a bit more. And that's where people don't always want to hear that advice.
Yeah. So I really took note when we were talking about the branding and the name. Where did the name come from? Because it's so clever.
Thank you. It was just a lot of bouncing around with the team, and I wanted something catchy. I think as an entrepreneur, I'm good at two things, and I think the best founders know what they're good at, and they know all the things they're bad at. The two things I'm good at are the vision and the taste. And so my vision was always super clear. Change the world, make it a healthier place with something delicious. So every time anyone chooses a bottle of Noughty over an alcoholic counterpart, they're actually making a health choice. Now, it's a health choice that you don't have to be sanctimonious about because you've got something delicious you're drinking. But that's such a powerful vision for me that, when I'm long gone, everyone who's drunk Noughty over alcohol is really doing something for their well-being. So for me, that was the powerful vision. And so I wanted something that was globally easy, catchy, one word, ask for it at the bar. I wanted a global brand from the beginning before I'd even sold a bottle. And I started to play around with words. And then I liked that catchy thing. I like the fact that fun was there, because I think so much of the alcohol-free world, certainly in a lot of people's eyes who do drink particularly, they're very negative about it. They think it's all very sanctimonious and serious and depressing. So I wanted to flip that, so I love that kind of playful element. But also I just wanted a globally catchy brand that in any country around the world, people could just say, I'd love a Noughty. I want Noughty. Yeah. Do you want Noughty? Bang. We had a lot of fun in America, my biggest market now, because naught and zero, they don't use zero for naught. So that's been fun, and they've loved the nuance. So that worked really well and wasn't a surprise to me. What was a surprise to me was the AF part. I may be a naive Brit, but I didn't know that in American kind of vernacular, AF has an interesting meaning. You can, I'm sure a lot of your viewers will get that now, AF. And I hadn't thought that one through. And there was this wonderful moment when I started to sort of sell in Noughty, the first bottle, on this big American presentation. And then someone was like, oh my God, I love that. That's really mischievous, Noughty, da, da, da. And I was like, and they repeated those words back to me and I was like, oh, no, I meant alcohol free. And I did my whole British kind of shock thing, which wasn't even a faux act. It was quite literal. And then I got off that Zoom and I was like panicking, going, this is a terrible idea. And then I did a bit more sort of research with my friends over there and a lot of the thought leaders, and it just blew up. And they were like, no, we love it. Keep it. It's even better. Yeah. So thankfully, naughtyaf.com, our website in America, is doing fine.
I love it. I think it's absolutely brilliant. And it's quite a bold statement right at the beginning to say you wanted it to be a global brand. Where did that where did that drive come from? Because some people just be happy to see it on supermarket shelves. So where was that big vision from?
I think I've always thought big in life, and I don't think it's bad to be happy to be a supermarket brand. To get into a supermarket, I've done it. It's really hard. And I think it's really important for founders to decide what they want to be and do. And my advice for any aspiring entrepreneurs, female founders, male founders, whoever listening, is I do think the vision piece is important from the get-go. Because for me, if I think I know what I'm building, I always know what I'm building. I always see it almost like a rainbow, my vision. And that's there all the time and it's super clear. And therefore, every setback I get, and it's funny when you'll know because you're a fellow founder, you know, when people haven't built a business from a blank sheet of paper, they come on these business podcasts, they go, tell me about your challenges. And you're like, well, I mean, should we speak the rest of my life about my challenges? You know, I mean, we have challenges every hour, every day, sometimes every minute. So I know that's a difficult question to answer for someone who's not, you know, in the entrepreneur space. But it's like, if you've got the vision, that always keeps you going. So I'm not telling everybody they have to think about building a global brand, but I think if you're building a kitchen table business or a UK business, or I always think it's really smart to actually find your vision first, and then you're working towards that. So I think that a lot of entrepreneurs seem a little bit muddly along the way about their vision and have built incredible things, but maybe haven't thought clearly enough about the vision. And I would advise anybody who's thinking about having a business or already has one to be able to tell anyone their vision in one sentence. You know, it's like the Americans say, the elevator pitch. You know, I just think it's so important, imperative, actually. And I keep, you know, reminding everybody, not everybody's vision has to be as massive as mine, but whatever it is, I would keep it very clearly where, you know, there. You know, it's always interesting, is it, whatever people's buzz is. I don't do manifesting, but it sounds interesting, and I know it works for some people. I guess it's that sort of thing. You know, I haven't got deep into manifesting, but I gather it's the same sort of philosophy. You know, what are you manifesting? What are you trying to do here? Because I think that what I find is so many British women are building incredible businesses, but often when I ask them about them, I almost have to draw out how incredible the business is. And I think I've come from broadcasting. I've come from a tough male-dominated world in old newsrooms. I'm in a male-dominated world now in wine. You know, I've built my resilience and confidence early stage from a complicated childhood. You know, that's a whole other podcast. But I think that women, really, we all need to just be much clearer on what we're setting out to achieve. And then we're perhaps not going to be quite so afraid to ask for it. And maybe this is going to help to solve a lot of the issues around funding problems for women. I mean, it's all very pertinent coming out of International Women's Day. I mean, it's embarrassing that we still have to have one, right? You know, but the stats aren't changing on women in business. 81% of 11 to 18-year-olds can't name a single female business leader, which is shocking, I think. So it's up to all of us to do something about that. So I think, going back to your question, I've just always had a really big vision, which British people call ambitious. In the US, that's how they all work pretty much. So I just think we could all do with a bit more of that kind of visionary, big thinking on this side of the pond if we're going to move the needle at all.
Yeah. And do you think that comes naturally? Because something I spoke about recently was, obviously I'm like obsessed with personal development, and that's not come from nurture. Like my family, my mum and dad are not into that at all. I just have always, since been little, read and been curious and want to know how the mind works. Do you think that like big vision piece, is that something you got from your mum, do you think? Or do you think it's just in you?
I think it's probably, like you say, now I'm forced to analyze it in me. I think I probably started life, you know, ready to challenge. I mean, I was a journalist first, so I've spent my life standing up for things I don't think are right, sometimes even when it's awkward, you know. I mean, I think it was probably in me, but that doesn't mean it can't be learned to some degree. And I always think the important piece in business is my point about there's only two things I'm good at: vision and taste. I think you, as an entrepreneur, self-awareness is fantastic. So I think once you know what you're good at and everything you're bad at, then you fill in all those gaps, don't you? And if you're going to have a co-founder scenario, you want that co-founder to be the yin to your yang. So I think you and I were probably the types who started life with a bit of hustle.
Yeah, definitely. And so you've obviously excelled in everything that you did before because you were a journalist, but not just a journalist, for the BBC. So just take us, before we carry on talking about Noughty, just take us like quick synopsis of career journalism and then changing into the wine industry.
Sure. I mean, you're very kind saying excelled. I would say, yeah, and I should take the compliment because women aren't good at taking compliments. So first of all, thank you very much for saying that. That's what I should say. Secondly, I think if it looked like I excelled, and thank you again, that was due to the hustle and hard work. And I guess that gets back to that piece that no one wants to really hear about because everybody wants the secret sauce. There's not a founder I know in my incredible big founder network who doesn't work harder than perhaps society might say we should. And so that's why I always think that there's such a gulf between you and I doing these wonderful podcasts where we're spitballing. It's lovely to see you, and actually everything else that is not fun going on behind the scenes. And so I think it's always important to share that. And, there is no secret sauce. The secret sauce is hustle and graft. That's it.
Do you know what? I'm so refreshing to hear you say that. This is so weird. I nearly recorded something on social media about this morning, but I didn't know how controversial it was because we've just been pulling out a load of like motivational quotes here at the office, ready for the Anything is Possible conference. And I've got my boards that I've saved for years on Pinterest, and a lot of it is like hustle, which now, there's a whole thing on no, get rid of the hustle culture. We shouldn't, set boundaries, like da 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 da. Now, I don't know if I'm old school, right? But I don't know. To your point, I don't know anybody that's got a successful business that works 9 till 5. And if they are, and if they have, please tell me how you're doing it, because I just don't know how that happens.
So I think, Holly, let's agree and circle back to that discussion point about what you're trying to achieve. And I think we have to recognize, don't we, that there are probably a lot of women out there. I know you've mostly got women watching this, but men who want to achieve a kitchen table successful lifestyle business. And that is fantastic. And props, that's one thing. If you're building something bigger, which is what we're talking about, there's no escaping the hustle. There's no escaping the fact that it will be challenging for one's mental health. There's no escaping the fact that there will be times when we'll be working from 6 o'clock until midnight and then not sleep. I think they're very different models. And I'm sure you're the same as me. I recognize that my staff need their boundaries. And so what I do, for example, is anytime after hours, I deal with everything, even as the founder still, unless it's urgent. And I say to my staff, I will only contact you out of hours when it's urgent. And so they know if I message them and I need something, because I'm traveling a lot. I was in New York last week. If I need something out of hours, they'll pick up. But so I think we're talking about different things, aren't we? But I completely agree. At founder level, no one's building a global brand, a hugely successful UK company, whatever level of big business, without the relentless graft and hustle. For everybody else who wants to focus more on their lifestyle, that's great. And let's just really respect that. I think they're quite different.
No, I do agree. And I think that it's taken a little bit of a swing, hasn't it, in terms of the media, in terms of it. There was this thing on hustle, especially for females, and then it has swung the other way. Personally, I'm at the stage now where, and similar to you, like I've had my business 11 years now, and I can feel a mental burnout. But you, as a founder, how do you stop? Because if you stop, your business stops. Have you experienced, I'm sure you have you experienced burnout, since you've been an entrepreneur?
It's a really interesting question, Holly, and I really empathize. And I'm sure I've felt many of the feelings you're talking about. And I think as women in business, I think we're in the spotlight a lot more, or we probably certainly feel like we are, because we're not scaling enough, because, we're competing with the big boys who are mostly boys, men. And so it's a difficult subject, isn't it? Absolutely. Yes. And it's hard to check oneself sometimes, isn't it? And I have a husband who luckily will check me. And sometimes he'll say, get to yoga. Yeah, the only thing really that grounds me and calms me down is exercise, I suppose. So that's it. Classic type A, right? I don't know what your thing is. Yeah. So the answer is yes. And it's not a good place to be. But I think it's addictive, isn't it? It is addictive, entrepreneurship. I mean, as you say, you can't stop.
Yeah. And it's interesting, actually, just thinking about what you're doing with Noughty, because we know we chatted up front in the podcast that this is not about any kind of like alcohol-free life. This is pro-choice, giving people balance in that choice. And to what we were talking about, I found myself in lockdown drinking a lot more. I was isolating on my own, and actually until really, really recently was a habit I'd got into and couldn't seem to get out of, because, and like I said, not alcoholism, but like before lockdown, I was very like, right, I'm going out this Saturday, I know I'm going to drink this, I know I'm going to be a bit hungover Sunday, I'm okay with that. But what I wouldn't do is I wouldn't drink on my own in the house, and I wouldn't use alcohol anything other than enjoyment. And then since lockdown, and it continued, because I found I've worked the hardest I've ever worked since lockdown. My go-to up until the end of 2022, I'm stressed, I'm going to have a glass of wine. This has happened, I don't know what to do with myself, I'm going to have a glass of wine. And I've made a real conscious effort to move away from that in 2023. I think as somebody that doesn't want to give up drink, it's amazing to have that choice.
Well, I think that's very brave. Thank you for sharing that. And I think your story is really, really common. It's that thing where you're not worried you're addicted, but you've just suddenly taken stock and recognized that it's becoming such an integral part of daily life. And I think that was the dangerous point that most of us felt at some point during the period. And I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? Everybody's got their story and everybody's got their level. And it's such it can be quite a sort of controversial conversation because everyone's got opinions. And I think what I really wanted to do with Noughty was say, we've got something really delicious. Often at events, if you're drinking Noughty, I'm drinking champagne, or I've had a glass of champagne and switched to Noughty, or in a glass, amongst all the bottles, we don't have to shout about it. So that's where for corporate entertaining and events, it's so pertinent. And there are so many people who use it as a prop. I know loads of famous sort of hospitality people. They're like, oh my God, it's been a godsend, because everyone's like, oh, aren't you having another glass of champagne? And I'm like, oh yeah, cheers, with the brute bubbles. Yeah. And so there's this really interesting piece with Noughty where, of course, I want everybody to PR it online, and thankfully they do. But behind the scenes, you've got that beautiful glassware, the glass. We have an inclusive drinking experience, and it's not really the topic of conversation. And going back to your point, I think what a lot of people are doing very successfully, I do it, is I might have one glass of champagne or bubbles, then switch to Noughty, or this blonde will be my everyday sort of fridge wine in the week if I want a little treat. Historically, we might have after work tonight said, oh, I really want a nice cold glass of something. I can have a nice cold glass of something delicious. Yeah. And of course, even if I decide to have 2 or 3, I'm going to wake up early, ready to face the day. And I think for entrepreneurs and business people, that's a godsend. Because if we've got this burnout scenario, all of that stress, whether or not, your mother's, whatever your reason, watching and listening, we all know how hard life can be sometimes. We've all got our stories. And if we've got a new ritual that we've replaced, boom. And that's where Noughty really can fit into everyday life. You replace your favorite bottle of red, white, bubbles, whatever, with Noughty, and you switch to that whenever, and you wake up and feel good in the morning. So it's kind of win-win.
Well, it's funny because I'm actually going out. I haven't had a drink for about 3 weeks, which sounds not much, but compared to what I was. And I'm going out on Saturday with a friend, and we looked at the menu, and I said, oh, they've got the non-alcoholic Aperol spritz, because I was thinking, oh, actually, that'd be quite, I love Aperol spritz anyway, but actually that might be a nice drink not to have the alcohol in, because I'm not drinking that for a drunk feeling. I'm drinking it because I love the taste. So it's just nice to see the alternative. So back to like, I'm always fascinated because I'm in the service industry. How do you make a product? Like, so how does it go from, you've got this idea that you want to do, you know, this product, but you obviously need the bottle, like, how does it happen? I'm so interested.
Yeah, there's a lot of steps. I suppose the way I view it is almost like a ladder or like a to-do list, I guess. So the first key step really was finding out what was out there initially. And so let's take when I developed Noughty, what was out there was a lot of lower priced liquid that was very sugary, very chemically, actually didn't make you feel good in the morning despite not having alcohol, because going back to your point about sugar and chemicals, even without alcohol, they're still going to give you a headache, right? So that was out there, and that wasn't anything that a wine lover would drink. So I think what separated my brand and what changed that position in the world of wine was having a brand that a wine lover would drink. And I think because I was coming at the creation from that historical wine snob place, I think that was pertinent. So the first step was what was out there already. And truthfully, I was pretty upset. There was really nothing at all that even vaguely pleased me. And that's the truth. It was really depressing, actually. And so then the next step was when I found a maker who was making well-crafted liquid, but it just wasn't to my taste. So the steps were really, I guess, the classic journalist piece, all of the research of what was already happening out there. For example, in America, they've long had some very successful alcohol-free wine, but I say very successful, you know, like under $10, and for a non-discerning wine crowd, it would be like, what are you going to pour if you need something, but you've sort of got to drink it? And, you know, all of those sort of apologetic things, nothing to do with the brand I was creating. And so that was the same sort of process. And then working with a maker to create the recipe, and then the branding. I mean, you know, it's like that classic thing, isn't it? These are whole other podcasts in themselves. But it was sort of a checklist of to-do lists that you work through, I guess. I mean, every stage is tough. The toughest stage was creating the liquid, actually. That was the toughest stage by far.
Yeah, and so that from launch in 2019, from starting to develop the product, how long was that?
So I had the idea in 17, 18, so probably a year ballpark, or I mean, actually, I probably had the idea a bit earlier, but so I started to embark on it probably 17, 18, and then, probably a year roughly.
Yeah. And you've mentioned your team and your strengths and weaknesses. So tell us about your team. How many people's in it? What's the hierarchy and the setup?
So we've got a fantastic team now. I've tried different permutations. At one point, when I had a champagne and prosecco brand, I had a slightly bigger team with less experienced people. I've flipped my model now. I think in COVID, a lot of us reshaped our businesses, and so there was a few people who were happy to move on, and, you know, it was just a sort of positive reshape all round. But what I'd learned was I actually find the business functions better with quite a top-heavy team of experts and less juniors. So we've got, I suppose, you could argue, an unusual model for a drinks brand. We've got roughly 10, and then a couple of different people who sort of are, you know, extension partners. So we're a UK entity, and then we sell around the world what they call in wine ex works or FOB. So basically the third parties pick up the wine from our external partners, and we sort of mitigated the Brexit piece. We produce outside the UK. So we only bring bottles into the UK that are going to be sold to Waitrose or Majestic or on our website. So most of our partners buy from outside the UK where the wine's produced.
That's really interesting, isn't it? And I think that's something that when people ask you, what would you change, from when you set up the business? And I think in the early days, certainly with me, you do pay for, you want to keep costs down, so you pay for less experienced people. And then I think as you get more into it, you've realized the value of experience and how much time that actually saves you and what it brings to the business. So it sounds like that's
Have you found the same? You found the same thing?
Yeah. But do you know what? I love junior team, and we've got some real bright sparks at the moment who are absolutely brilliant and developing really quick, but you have to have that senior layer as well. And I think for you as a founder and entrepreneur to do, to your point, your strengths, work on the vision, the product, you need that senior support on the ground, don't you? I think that's interesting.
You're right. You're right about the combination as well.
Yeah. So you're a B Corp as well. So I've heard a podcast with a guy that founded Cook talking about being a B Corp, and it's a process, right, to get there. For the non-knowing podcast listeners, can you sum up kind of in a few sentences what being a B Corp is?
Sure. It's basically striving to do the right thing sustainably, ethically, and really when nobody's looking. And I guess, we all read a lot about greenwashing. We all know that we need to do better for the climate. So obviously that's the big piece. We've got written into our share articles that we can make decisions in business not just to do with profit, but also to do with ethics. And so that's also relevant. So it's really everything down to how you treat your staff, to ensuring that you try and put the spotlight on diversity with your hiring of team, you name it. It's really striving to do better. And what's really interesting about B Corp and the recertification process each year of going through it is you're all recognizing that you're not perfect. No business is perfect, but it's just really trying to do better. So you basically get a point system when you start for every aspect of your business. And then each year you have to strive to do better. And so that's sort of where we are with it. It's becoming more recognized in the UK. I mean, Coutts Bank, for example, have put up female-founded B Corps on their wall at the Strand in London this month. It started in America with businesses like Patagonia, who are encouraging you not to buy things. So it's quite a pertinent sort of philosophy that plays out really well with the younger generation, who kind of are much more attuned to buying from businesses that they think are ethically doing the right thing.
Oh, absolutely. And it's really interesting. I think that as a business, I can learn from definitely our younger members of the team, and in that space, but also in your space, because what I noticed as well a few years ago is my drinking habits from being like, that ladette culture compared to kind of the 20-year-olds in the office now is a really interesting dynamic. And I think in a way what's quite interesting is you kind of get to a point, if you sort of say to the younger people, oh, I'm down for a glass of wine tonight, it just wouldn't be on their radar to do that after work. So actually it makes you want to do a bit better, because you're a bit like, oh, well, I sound like an alcoholic if I'm going to have a glass of wine for stress. So I think we can learn so much. And I don't know if you're the same, but in terms of sustainability, I love to involve them in it, because I feel like it's just ingrained in them. I mean, you obviously had a very progressive mum that taught you quite a lot, probably from a young age. So I guess it's in you, is it, to kind of build better businesses and be better?
I suppose it comes round. It's interesting, isn't it? You and I both reflecting on our childhood and what was nature, nurture.
Yeah.
And who knows, right? But yeah, as I get older, I'm probably thinking more it's the nature piece, but who knows, right?
Yeah.
I think it's just that piece of, well, going back to my point, trying to do the right thing when no one's looking, which obviously is the opposite of greenwashing. And I think businesses who are pretending to do the right thing and putting out these platitudes as to what they're doing, I think will get caught out. We all know it's hard. We all know no one's perfect. But I think you can't argue now any which way that you have to sign up to the philosophy, whether you like it or not. So I think that's a positive thing. Everything's a challenge there. I mean, we're still obviously dealing with glass. we're still shipping bottles. It's not ideal. Rome wasn't built in a day, I guess.
Yeah. And you've been, we were talking before, you've been plant-based, I think always, have you, in terms of eating?
Yeah, very radical since the 70s. Yeah.
Have you ever had a steak or a piece of chicken? Have you ever had?
No, only accidentally in Asia or whatever, where they mistakenly put it in your food. I've never chosen to. And so I'm quite an interesting non-meat eater in the sense that it's not a political decision. I mean, obviously I have opinions on whether one should eat meat, but I was brought up vegetarian, which is quite a hard concept to get across to people who have a strong relationship with loving meat. I've never eaten it. I've never eaten meat or fish, apart from, as I've said, accidentally traveling. And so it's not even as if I got over my philosophical beliefs, it's not even like I would like it, because when I've had it accidentally, if you've never had it, it's a really hard concept to explain. But I just wouldn't eat flesh and a living thing, because it's just not in my DNA, I suppose. So it's certainly not like I could miss it,
Yeah. And is that a space you think you'd ever be interested in going into, the food business, or are you purely?
No, I'm super happy in wine, and the vegan element's important. We got our vegan certification for our sparkling when we launched it, and we were the first brand in the mainstream to talk about animal products being used in wine filtration. So I guess it's integrated into my wine business, that conversation. So we were the first wine brand that all the vegan community got excited about in the UK and then around the world, because no one had ever really focused on that before, which goes back to my point that the wine industry is full of smoke and mirrors. And we recognized that anything that we could focus on to be transparent was really only going to be a plus.
Yeah. And I mean, I love the wellness space. And I think if I had my time again, that's the industry I would have gone into. And there's so many exciting brands in the food and beverage sector, that are treading into this space. Have you, because I am an events experiential background, have you done many collaborations with other like food brands or, to activate Noughty?
Yeah, we are always open to partnerships, and we're starting to do more in the US on that side. And anyone who's got a really interesting, innovative brand in another space is always particularly interesting to us. I think it's been fantastic the way the alcohol-free sort of homogenous brand community has risen, but we're quite different in that we can operate very successfully there, but our bigger play is in that traditional everyday mainstream wine community. So I think we've got a lot of touch points. We can operate within the alcohol-free space, within the wine industry, within the wellness space, within the health tech space. So yeah, there are all kinds of partnership opportunities that are exciting to us, usually in brands where they share our ultimate philosophy, but there's a really interesting kind of cross section in the Venn diagram.
Yeah. And you wrote in an article pre-2023 that you wanted Noughty to be available in 20 countries by 2023, but you smashed that goal. Can you tell our listeners where you are at the moment?
Well, I mean, my sales director always tells me off. He says, no, it's more now. I think we're in about 50 countries ballpark. Some of those are seeded, so we may be selling a few thousand bottles. America's our big play now. So I'm just back from the US, and the New York crowd is super excited about Noughty. And of course, that's where trends are really properly built. So that's really exciting. That was where I was with a wine taster, and we were tasting, and he's like, that's not just great non-alcoholic wine, Amanda, that's great wine, period.
That's a really great,
and that was really the manna from heaven. Those were the words that I wanted to hear. And so now we're a serious brand in America. I mean, we're leading the American wine market in terms of positioning. I'm on the Non-Alcoholic Beverage Association board in the US with all the big non-alcoholic founders in beer and in alcohol-free spirits as to how we shape that industry in the US. I'm the only Brit as the wine expert, which was pretty exciting.
Definitely. And to scale in that way, have you had funding? Do you have a business partner? Like, how have you been able to scale to such a degree?
Sure. So we took early stage seed funding. There's a scheme in the UK that some of your listeners may know about. This is assuming the budget keeps it. It's really important for early stage founders. People can invest under a scheme called SEIS, which is basically, to cut a long story short, where you can put money in and it really is offset with your tax, in the sense that even if, God forbid, the business doesn't work out, you know, it means you don't really lose much money. So it's just a really tax efficient way, early stage, of getting money into the economy to help businesses grow right in the beginning. So we took early stage seed funding from a few key people that I'd hustled to find. And then we did quite a few years ago a crowd fund that overfunded at over $1 million. And then I got the business to profitability really as quickly as I could. That was quite rare for a drinks brand. They mostly cash burn for a long time. And so I'm pretty proud of that, along with my team. And so we're now profitable, and we are probably not going to do a raise for a while. I mean, it's lovely. It's the classic thing in business. When you're desperate for money, it's almost impossible to get it. It's a bit like dating, I suppose. The more needy you are, no one wants to know. Now, all the big investors would happily throw money at me because I've built a profitable consumer brand, which is very rare in the consumer brand world, and certainly in the drinks world. I think we're probably rarer than hen's teeth. So I've proved myself there. So that's pretty interesting. Fundraising is a whole deep topic, isn't it? I mean, what I really liked about that early stage sort of crowdfund is it's a very democratic process. And we still live in a world, we all know, after International Women's Day, where it is very hard to get serious institutional funding as a woman, a lot harder, despite the fact that statistically we're more likely to scale successful business. Therein lies an irony. But crowdfunding is a much more democratic way for female founders to raise, because actually it's been proved that it's just as easy, if not easier, for female founders to raise that way. So that's quite a nice thing to share, I suppose.
What a great story that you got to profit quite quickly. If you were going to give our listeners who have got various different businesses, your like 3 top tips, and I know it's specific to your business, but what are your tips of how to get to profitability when you've got a heavy investment up front?
Free stuff is overrated. I give away very little free stuff. Every man and his dog every day asks for free stuff. For me, each bottle of Noughty is super valuable. Louis Vuitton don't give away bags. You know, when I was a journalist, I used to go to wonderful parties, and half the time you'd ask people what the champagne was, and there might be a little bit of brownie in the background, but the poor staff serving wouldn't have been told. Everybody thinks that drinks brands are built on free stuff. They're actually built the opposite way around, I believe, sustainably. Don't give away any free stuff. I mean, if I give somebody a sample, it's because I have personally said, yes, I mean, Holly, I would love you to taste my wine. It means something.
Yeah.
You know, free stuff is not valued. Yeah. Conceptually. So the first tip is don't do free stuff. Second tip is cash is king. It's a boring one. There's never as much as you need, ever. Third one is, and this is tough for some people, you know, you've got to be self-aware. And I know it's an uncomfortable conversation with lots of people, but this is why I say I'm good at 2 things, vision and taste. What are you good at? You know, don't pretend you're good at everything. You're not. You know, pick what you're good at, recognize it, analyze, be self-aware, and then fill in all of those gaps in expertise as early as you can. So those would be my 3 tips.
They are brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So we're coming to the close of the podcast. I could genuinely talk to you all day. It's so articulate.
Hey, it was lovely to chat.
So interesting. I'm just really curious in terms of, you know, the one goal that I did read about you, the 20 countries by 2023. I'm sure that's one of many goals. How do you set goals? Do you do short term, long term? Do you write things down? Like, what's your process?
I mean, we have a strategy with the team. So our strategy is very clear as to which markets we want to win and go deep in. So really America is our win and go deep market. And the lovely thing about winning, I say America, I don't mean every state in America. I think that's a very important point to share. Look on America and business as different states, as in different countries. So that's also a tip. And so winning key states in America, and, you know, that was really the strategy. And then, of course, what you've got, going back to trends in New York and London, really, is if you pick your key cities, you know, where trends are built for a brand like mine, it's all about building that trend and then going deep and then becoming an everyday brand. I mean, those are kind of obviously easy to say, almost impossible to do. And so, yeah, we have a very, very clear strategy. But we also, and this is important, I think, to our success, and I would recommend to entrepreneurs who have big vision business, is do not ever miss an opportunity that is also in front of you. Because I think sometimes, and this is where you've got the advantage over big business, sometimes, you know, big business is steering a ship one way strategically, and then if something else comes along, no, you know, they couldn't even look or think about that. So you've got to have your clear strategy, but also recognize if the phone rings this afternoon and I pick it up and there's an opportunity, I will still look to take it. So it's that kind of combination that I think is important. And actually, the other thing that I didn't share and we didn't talk about, and I don't think it's talked about enough in business, you know, with founders, is execution and obsession with detail and always doing what you say you'll do. You know, I say to my team, you get one shot, one customer, you screw up once, that's it, you lose them forever. So our obsession with customers is just at the heart of our business. And if something goes wrong with the delivery, we say, we are so sorry about that. What can we do to put this right? Because I know when I'm buying from a brand, the second someone sends me a crappy email or doesn't respond, or that's your, you know, we live in such a fast society culturally with brands and our relationship with brands. And then just lastly, always share the story. Never forget that anybody you speak to will sell your brand. And so that's the bit, going right back to the hustle, Holly, you'll know, and the bit that perhaps isn't that healthy. You know, if I'm out for dinner with my husband tonight, unfortunately for him, if Noughty's not on the list, it will be an obvious sales opportunity, potentially. I mean, it's not fun to be around founders all the time because we're kind of a crazy bunch, but, you know, you never miss a sales opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And how, I am going to ask you a couple more questions really, really quick. How does your week look? How do you manage your time? Like, what is a typical week for Amanda?
So I overschedule my diary, and that's something I'm working on. I'm working on saying yes to less. If I like somebody and they ask me to do something within reason, I say yes. And I realize now my business is at a different level, so I have to be a little more protective of my time. So I don't have a PAEA. I had one for a while and it didn't work so well for me.
Same with me.
I manage my own diary. So people kind of go, oh, tell your PA to do this. I'm like, no, your PA can talk to me, you know, whatever. I find all that really funny sometimes when people try and create this whole layer that you can't talk to the founder. And so I overschedule, and I'm sure you know how that is. And I think it's very easy on Zoom to think you can go back to back because you're not moving from your desk. But of course, mentally, you do need those breaks. So I'm trying to get better at that. But my diary is literally, I mean, my friends who aren't founders look at my diary on my phone and they just go, they come out in hives. So I micromanage my own diary, basically.
I'm the same. I had a PA before lockdown, but now because everything is Zoom and you can do things quickly, I just find it easier. But I don't know if I'm like you, I have my steps in, my gym in, my lunch in, like I literally cram everything in so that every minute is maximized. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. But so before we close, Amanda, for those people now that are super curious about Noughty, just quickly whiz us through your product range. Where can we buy it and take it home, and where can we drink it out and about?
Sure. So find us at naughtyaf.com. And that's naughty with an O. We're on social media the same, Noughty AF on Instagram. Our website, you can buy direct from us. So we do subscriptions, single bottles. We're also in a lot of places around the UK, like Waitrose, Majestic, certain Sainsbury's, and lots of different bars and restaurants. If you're in the north, we're working on that. We really want a lot more Manchester stockists. So anyone who's got contacts, let me know, because I think it's very easy as a London brand to end up being a bit London centric. And we love the north. We have so many private clients there, but we really need to get better at being available in key bars and restaurants there. So I'd love anyone's sort of advice or recommendations and links to contacts of potential stockists, particularly in Manchester, actually.
Yeah, I mean, we can have that,
yeah, brilliant. But yeah, the best place to sort of find out about us is naughtyaf.com with an O.
Great. And what, before we end the podcast, Amanda, something that I ask all my guests, it is called Anything is Possible. What does anything is possible mean to you?
It means actually that when I leave this earth, I will have a legacy and I will have made a difference. And I think that that's super powerful. And I would say to anybody now listening, thinking about starting their own business, or, you know, maybe, or all that separates one idea from a business is that most people don't act on the idea. And I always think if you just take that first step, or if you make yourself accountable by sharing your idea with somebody, then it isn't just an idea in your head. Because we all know that lots of people get to the end of their lives and regret things. And I think if you can make a difference in the world and leave it in better shape, then why not?
Wow,
that's what it is.
I mean, you are so interesting and so, as I say, so articulate. I feel like we could have sprung a million different subjects off that. I'm sure that our listeners will be so inspired by your story. I'm actually inspired to try some more of your wines. I've had the sparkling, but I need to widen my selection. Thank you for taking the time to say yes to doing this podcast. It's always
delighted. Thank you.
It's always amazing to have brands and people that you've admired and followed and say yes. It makes for such an interesting episode. So to our listeners, get a bottle of Noughty, try it, let us know what you think. We certainly will. There we go. And rosé's coming. By the time this podcast goes out, the Provence style still rosé. We've had a sparkling rosé a long time, still Provence rosé, set to be the drink of the summer, Holly. Oh, well, I'm just going to put my Whispering Angel to one side and grab that instead. So
bang on.
Amanda, thank you for spending some time with us, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you so much. Take care.